thanks for coming. This is the Mobile Super Forum. As Jed mentioned, we have about an hour and a half of content. And some of you guys may have been to a few of our past Mobile Super Forums where we have this kind of quick hit format and roll through a number of segments, each on different kind of sub-topics within mobile. What we've decided to do is let a little breathing room in and instead have one speaker per topic, back-to-back, in the form of on-stage interviews and data points and things that we can riff on. And then we're going to go right into a more kind of traditional format of a panel with some heavy hitters in the local space. I want to start off with some kind of trend analysis and underlying data points. But first, I want to give a shout-out to BI Kelsey's Mobile Local Media Program. This is our advisory service that I run where we focus on all things mobile and the quickly evolving mobile ecosystem where there are many moving parts. And we look at all of the opportunities in the space and everything that's happening that you should be paying attention to. And that really comes in many different flavors, advisory services, editorial output, speaking engagements like these conferences, one-on-one strategy consulting, and all kinds of things. So if you have any other questions about how we can work together, best contact is my colleague Steve Passwaiter, who's at spasswaiter@bia.com. So the first thing I want to talk about is an area that I've looked at for the last few years, which is the collision of social, local, and mobile. And these are three areas that independently are emerging in different ways, but also colliding, and they plug into each other in lots of interesting ways, and more so as they each kind of develop technologically and with cultural adoption. And there are really a lot of interesting things happening at this three-way intersection. John Doerr recently coined the term SOLOMO, which is kind of a funky term, but really kind of encapsulates it. I think you're going to hear a lot more of this term in the coming months. So if you strip out the local part of that and just looking at two-thirds of that equation, the mobile and the social, right now, social networking is one of the highest content consumption categories on the mobile device. These are ComScore data that show that 25% of mobile subscribers in the U.S. are actively involved in social networking. Now, that's less than some other areas such as SMS, email, but if you look at the trend line of the year-over-year growth, it's clearly growing a lot more than these other content areas, and that's represented by this light blue line. Now, bringing local back into this equation, how is that really playing out in local? That's really manifesting in geosocial services, location-based services, and the most popular form of that right now is kind of the check-in service, which we keep hearing about. We heard from Evan Cohen at Foursquare yesterday, innovating a lot of new ways to have this kind of check-in mean more than just something for friends to meet up. Now, that's kind of the point. 2010 was really a breakout year for check-in services and Foursquare especially. 2011, we're starting to see business models form around these services. Ways to have them broaden to include local discovery utilities, finding things to do or to see or to buy that are around me that are based on that, kind of me raising my hand to tell my friends where I am and what I'm doing. We're really starting to see that solidify. Scavenger, which we're going to hear from in a little while, has kind of a different flavor of this kind of general concept and is already monetizing and seeing real revenues from driving brand engagement and direct response to the companies that it's working with in a lot of interesting ways. But what I like to say sometimes is that we're at the Friendster stage of LBS. And I don't mean to kind of downplay some of the leaders in this space by calling it that, but the point is that, circa 2004, when Friendster was kind of flying high, clearly at that point, looking back, industry standards had not really been established, and winners had not been decided, if we look at what's been happening since then. So the point is we have a lot of growth yet to be had and standards to be established in this location-based services space. So one of the points, as I kind of alluded to earlier, check-ins is just the beginning. Foursquare is the first one to admit this, that it's not just about a check-in, but it's really about broadening the value proposition for the user to discover things around them. And it's also not just about serving content based on the check-in that I just made, time and place and person, as kind of static data points, but what are my last 40 check-ins? And what does that say about who I am, my patterns throughout life, and the types of content that I'm more likely to respond to? And I think that those models of algorithmically bringing in that discovery element are really in fast forward, and we're going to see a lot of innovation in the coming months to look out for. And the type of content, this is the interesting part, the type of content that seem to stick into these models is what is also in parallel developing and exploding, which is deals, daily deals, group buying. And that's the kind of one of the interesting things I've been looking at and talking about a lot is that you have these two areas that independently are exploding, mobile and daily deals and group buying. They have not yet come together to the degree that we think they should and they will. When you look at the success that a company like Groupon has had, that's mostly based on email marketing and an online interface, and it's also based on a 24-hour deal clock and a redemption cycle that is, a matter of weeks. If you look at the incremental opportunity to reach users when they're away from their desktop and the incremental opportunity to appeal to merchants and advertisers in categories that are more conducive to dynamic levels of inventory, something that has to happen in the next few hours, think restaurants, bar happy hours, movie tickets, lots of different things that I think that when those two things come together, there's a great amount of growth that can happen, and it's really already happening. Groupon earlier in the week started to allude to a product called Groupon Now, which is essentially an iPhone app that's a version of what I just outlined. Scavenger is doing this in other interesting ways. Foursquare, of course, we heard from Evan yesterday about some of the new templated deals that they're doing that basically bring more definition around how an average merchant can utilize Foursquare in the form of 7 different types of deals. 2 of those are very much along the lines of what I'm talking about in the swarm deals and the flash specials. So that's clearly an area to look out for if you are in any way getting into mobile and or deals and how they come together. There's really a lot of growth to be had there. So the last point I want to make here in terms of just setting the scene is local and stripping out that social elements, and now we're just mobile and local. This is our mobile ad revenue forecast for the U.S., showing that ad revenues in 2009 about $400 million, going up to about $2.9 billion in 2014. Now the point here is that the locally targeted portion of this ad spend is going to grow at an accelerated rate. And the way we define local is advertising that is targeted based on a user's location. So the online version of that would be IP targeting, or in search, targeting based on a user's explicit geographic query. Now, in mobile, of course, the ability to get much more granular, given the fact that every device is or will be location aware with GPS, is a big opportunity. And we think that a lot more advertisers, both national and local advertisers, are going to start to utilize that fact, which right now they're not doing to its ability. And it's not just going to be the volume of advertising units sold, but also they're going to carry premiums based on that local relevance. And that's going to really shift some of these dollars in the way that you see on this slide. Now, in support of that, I talked to a lot of mobile local ad networks. These are ad networks that specialize in placing ads that are both local in content and then also in their targeting metrics. And they're seeing some pretty strong performance metrics to support some of the numbers on the previous slide. XAD, Where, which we're going to hear from later, and CityGrid, which we're going to hear from later, and Chitika. XAD has reported that 80%, or it's seeing 80% fill rates. It's seeing 10% CTRs, which is about 100x what we see on the desktop, if you consider that most desktop click-through rates for display ads are fractions of a percent. Half of those ads are resulting in secondary actions like phone calls. Where is reporting that 11% of clicks result in calls or directions. And Chitika has reported that locally targeted mobile ads are clicked 64% higher than non-locally targeted ads in the mobile environment. So again, supportive of what we're going to start to see in terms of premium ad rates for this locally targeted segment. So I'm kind of running out of time, and I want to save more time for our speakers. Christina, you can actually start coming up. Christina's going to be our first speaker, and I'll end on this point, which is that we are going to hear from Tobias Dengel in just a minute on, after you decide you want to get into mobile based on many of the supporting points that I just mentioned and what we're hearing throughout the marketplace, still you're left with the question of how, once you make the decision of why you want to get into it. What platforms do you go after? Who are your users? What are your users? What devices are they carrying? So we're going to have a kind of how-to session in a bit on some of these key metrics. So with that...